Got it.
Cool.
All right. Well, this is Tactical Tuesday. Why don't we, I don't know how Michelle ended up before Aubrey on my list because you weren't, it's not then by when you signed in. This is also weird. There you go, I just reordered. So why don't we,
better.
why don't we can go ahead and we'll just start off with Aubrey and then we'll do Michelle and Bryce.
Mhm.
Okie dokie. I have a list of topics. I guess the first we could start with is we kind of talked to one of the Australia students today. Did not get the second one, and we're gonna have a varying level of availability, and said they would like to work on. I think a new form is their preference, but also available to pick up other
Yeah.
things.
Although I'm not sure that's where her preference ended up in the end. I think she started questioning whether or not she wanted. She started off by saying new form, and then I think she was thinking, oh, well, not knowing what the other person's going to want to do.
Yeah,
So
I got maybe some flexibility was
definitely flexibility, and I think in the end it felt like she was moving towards doing more discrete work without knowing what the other person was interested in.
Okay, so then maybe I will pitch the discrete work first, the smaller, and see if we can get an idea of priority. Some background tools that I've been thinking about was picking up the smart docketing tool again that the consumer default interview had started, but needed more robust development to be usable. And that's something that could be useful in more than just that interview. It was started there because it's essentially necessary to be able to use that one, but otherwise could be implemented across multiple of the interviews that we have that are coming down the line, etc. Another thing is the court location project for different mailing addresses. We've got that information gathered. I don't know what needs to happen behind the scenes, but it seems like maybe we could have student hands on that if it was really a lot of just fill in the blank, run it, make sure it works. Another thing that I was thinking about for a tool is I built out like the multi-party, multi-service. Do you have an attorney? Do they have an attorney for the appeals specific? It lives in an interview, but if it works as it should, then it seems like something that we could build into appeals basic questions and maybe a QL baseline to make that more robust and standardized for like MVP plus. Maybe it doesn't need to, we don't need to necessarily go back, but MVP plus it would, I think, be helpful. So those were the 3 tools. Other projects were update older interviews to the MAVC code, or go and embed the interpreter notice in all the interviews that we need it. Essentially all of the ones that are not sent to court so that they would have it if they need it. Same thing for affidavit of indigency. And then I have new forms, but those are the project specific, and that's a lot of them. Any catch anybody's ear?
You like the idea of, well, I'll be quiet first. And so, Caroline, to give you some context, we have a couple of Australian students who are going to help out, and we're trying to figure out what might be a good project for them. And they'll be starting right now and probably running into September. There'll probably be 2 of them. Originally were 3 that were maybe, but I've only heard back from 2 of them. Only one of them made it to today's call. So the 2 that remain, I think, are likely to have somewhere between at least maybe 7 hours a week, plus probably not double than that for the next month and some change.
That's pretty exciting. I mean, the thing is, first of all, I'm thinking, Audrey, you're doing so much. And then I realized, but I just think you just pulling all that stuff together is a lot of work, trying to figure all that out. So that's really impressive.
Thank you. I haven't done anything on any of those projects. Those are things that float around
Ideas.
in
But
their
just,
like brain
I mean, this sort
floaters.
of, yeah, but I mean, having the sort of big picture and organizing it that way is pretty impressive. I'm really kind of blown away by that.
Thank you. But are there any that you
We have,
feel like have a particular heavy impact, or and I can run through the list again.
Yeah. I think we're looking for bang for buck. The one that
Yeah.
pops out to me is attaching existing forms to old forms. So the interpreter notice or the affidavit of indigency,
Mhm.
because those are things that already exist. And if we just attach them to existing stuff, they can then make those things even better.
Maybe, can we just say integrating rather than attaching? Because that's what we're talking about doing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
Integrating is a better word.
overload,
That's a better
yeah.
word. Yeah, what was that, Bryce? I think what was that, Bryce? What'd you say?
Oh, just that it's, yeah, attaching is kind of overloaded. There are only so many words.
I
Okay.
like integrating.
I think we may have some trouble where the kind of understanding of who the user is, if they're the main party, like, you know, like addresses or like names that are going in the affidavit of indigency might not be correct in that,
Yeah,
in those
that's
circumstances.
it's an important thing to flag to think about for the integration, right? Is recognizing that when you integrate, you have to make sure that the mappings between the assumed users are what you think they are.
Also, I think the integration of this is a really good exercise, because this is something we've been struggling with from day one, is who's the user, right? And then the variable name and all of that. And I think when you start to do more, in a way, it doesn't matter. It matters for those forms where the form could be used by either plaintiff or defendant. So you get that. It matters when you've got an advocate representing somebody else. But then when you're integrating some of these generic forms like affidavit of indigency, it really matters a lot. So I think it's an excellent exercise to help us think more and more about how we're gonna use the variable, or what variable name we're gonna use, and go forward like that. So I think that's sort of like a collateral reward for this. It's a pain in the ass for whoever has to do it, but I think it'll really help the project in terms of that.
So it feels like that's a promising avenue of stuff. I don't want to make the decision yet without thinking about whether or not there are some full form things that also would give some value. So what else do you have on the plate? I know we have full forms, and then we have like feature sets of like improvements to MVPs or bringing stuff across MVPs.
Yes, so there's lots of various stages of things that are floating. And I think that we would might have trouble actually picking one for them, just considering the time that they're going to commit. They might just kind of feel like they never really make substantial progress. So I think that a new form would probably be better. And for new forms, I was thinking the complaint for contempt didn't seem too long, seemed relatively straightforward. It might cause existential crisis along the way, but a good amount of different kinds of fields, questions that it would meet their skill set.
That's in probate and family court, that complaint for contempt, yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then another one that actually was not on the list, but that I've been working on the motion to vacate a default judgment for the housing court. And I was thinking that a standalone motion to stay execution would be really helpful with the impending like end of the moratorium. That we have a motion to stay embedded in the motion to vacate, but if somebody does not have a notice to remove at the time that they go, they do get a rehearing. They lose in that rehearing, and then they will get a notice of eviction to be removed by the sheriff or constable. We want them to be able to come back and use just that part of our interview. And I was thinking that would actually be really imminently helpful as a new form that gets built. And
there's also, I was talking to Quentin about the status of our existing forms given the end of the moratorium, and we have a motion we obviously, we took down the CDC bit because that's not anymore. But we still have our, we have the motion to dismiss or stay eviction for tenant who files. Is that the one you said you've been working on?
No, motion to vacate a default judgment. So
All right.
someone missed.
Okay, so there is a motion to dismiss or stay eviction for tenant who filed the CDC moratorium. We think that actually that encompasses more than just the CDC moratorium, or it should. So
Okay.
actually, it might be better to repurpose that existing motion to stay to do what you were talking about, as opposed to making a brand new motion. So if you want to give a look at that and see how far off it is from what you're envisioning, I think that would be a nice step. I think given the timing of that one, if we want to get that in place to be useful for folks, that's probably not a thing to give to a new set of people.
Okay.
So if we want to prioritize that, we might retask some existing folks to do that. And I got the sense, Quentin's of course not here to speak for himself, that Quentin might have some thoughts on exactly where to go with that. I also want to be cognizant of the fact that we're in a bizarre balancing act situation. To the extent that we can take things off Bryce's plate, we want to take things off Bryce's plate. So I want to keep people's capacity for that. But otherwise, it might be the type of thing Quentin might want to take some part on.
Okay.
Okay. So that's okay. So there's that.
Okay.
Other thoughts.
I think that's it for discussion of potential handouts. Feels like have a good one for if they're going to kind of tool, we'll give them the integration, building that out, documenting some of it.
Yeah, I think that would be the key, right? Because we haven't really documented that yet. So the thing to make explicit would be, here's something we want to do. We don't have documentation for this yet. So we would like you to do it and to document it. And that way we can be replicated.
Right.
And we can have them start. I think that might be a good entrance into our packages, right? So these, by way of context, these students have already taken a class with DocAssemble and developed and built a thing. So they're already familiar with DocAssemble. What they aren't familiar with is sort of our practices and frameworks. So it might be good to sort of, might be a good entrance to be like, here's how we handle, things, and here's how we envision sticking them together, integrating them. So I like this. I also think for just sheer impact, this has the potential to do the most impact because it can supercharge existing forms, and multiple forms at that. So it's not like we have to choose the form that's. Whereas when we choose a new form, it's like, well, is this a new form a lot of people are going to use? All right, I like that as a general sense then. So I think what we'll do, Aubrey, you and I will coordinate, and we'll try to set them up with the idea of integrating these. So we'll need to figure out what forms to integrate some of them into. But I think that sounds like a good starting place. All right, cool. Anything else, Aubrey?
Yes.
Tactical.
Yes, this is tactical. So to go back to the discussion last week of starting a production board, I have one, and it's got some loose checklists on it. The one thing that I wanted to talk about as a group, though, was specifically automation of it. So this is a process to maybe think about going back and looking at the forms more regularly, seeing what needs updating, seeing where things stand. So it will every Monday run an automation and say move for the cards that have been in essentially the form is live first column on that board, or actually share. And move them into needs a review, essentially. We can have up to 50 automations on our free account, so it will use 4 a month out of the 50.
It's 50 a month. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I'll send you my source because make sure I read it right. But it essentially every Monday, so at admin, you can open this up, or you can say which ones do we actually want to look at. Okay, we'll move them into needs a review, or you can move them back into here. And so it'll only move the ones that have been in form as Lyme for X amount of days. So right now I have it set at 90 days. It's been live, sitting there for 90 days. I don't know if you have a different amount of time that was in mind. But everything that did get moved has been sitting in the old form as live for more than 90 days. It's a little skewed because I made cards for everything that is live, and those are all brand new and have only been in there. But essentially, it was like it's starting from the end of last week for everything that's new. That's
And
as
so
good as I
the
can
notion
say.
is here is just to provide us a little tickler as so it will move things into the 4.2. Then a manual determination is like, oh yeah, we do want to review this, or no, let's throw this back in the bin. In which
Yeah,
case it goes to the back of the line because it's only been in that bin for, you just popped it in there.
right.
Um,
And so the thought was at admin, or maybe, at the beginning of the week, it can be somebody's task, but that it would just be a regular, let's quickly go through these, because eventually this list shouldn't be so long.
yeah, well, I like that as a general notion. What do we have to the right here on this? What other verticals do we have?
So I have buffer. It needs essentially someone needs to take the task of reviewing if it is going to be reviewed. It's in process. Any upgrades, or maybe there's a better word for it than upgrade, but any changes are being made and then being reviewed, and it needs a
What's the difference between upgrade
This is
and
old.
process and 4.4? So review and
review
that
is
means
like,
the reviewer's looking at it.
yeah, I guess it's determining like just kind of
Adding
that
issues.
what's MVP, what's
adding issues, right?
MVP
So that would be
versus not
adding
MVP.
issues, right?
Because
And then,
my
okay.
assumption
So I think
here,
each of these is just to clarify, each of the columns is an action that a person is doing. So review means a person is reviewing it, right? And just so
I
is
just
that-
forgot that the review, so I was thinking Mass Legal Help Review, because when you review it, you make comments, right? So, but you're saying, so basically the reviewer would be creating issues. And then the upgrade, the reviewer may not be the person who's doing the issues. And that's why the upgrade column,
Yeah.
it's like addressing
Yeah.
creating
Yeah.
issues is reviewing, and addressing issues is the upgrade. I just hadn't clicked on that one.
no,
The
and
reviewer feels like it would be more of like the PM or like a project lead person, like Aubrey or David going through
Right.
and saying
Yeah.
like, hey, like we should maybe think about adding a lot of these features to our forms.
Mhm.
And then,
Yeah.
And then I also separated out just because I feel like there might end up being different kinds of review. Like, oh, this is a form, a lot has changed since we launched this. It might need like legal changes, or
Mhm.
we have new features to add. Like there's different kinds of
Different
reviews that I
kinds of
imagine that would
reviews,
happen.
yeah.
So I really separated them out because we might get like a SME review and then need a technical upgrade to implement them, or we
Would
might
that-
just do technical
Would that be a
reviews.
checklist? So for review and process, so you'd have a checklist, you'd have an SME review, a plain language review, and a functional new features review, or something like AL review or something like that.
Yeah, I think that like for example, for in the development board, I think, or maybe it's reprocessing, but we have like a checklist like 2.1A and 2.1B. So if it's a docx, do this. If it's a PDF, do
Yeah.
this. Kind of create checklists for each of them,
Mhm.
style reviews. But I haven't actually built anything out yet because I wasn't going to build things out and then
Yeah.
I
get your
don't think we need
feedback.
to, we always got to ask, what job are we trying to do with this, right? And so I think what this is, and I'll say this out and then people can reflect back to me if they think there are other jobs that this is trying to do. But that basically we have right now a situation where things get published, and then unless we're actively involved with that form, say with appeals and they have particular requests, or we find something wrong with something, or the law changes and we know about it and we go back in, there's no tickler or mechanism by which we are forced to revisit things which otherwise we might not. And that this is a means to formalize the process of making sure that things don't just languish there, and that we're intentional about, yes, we decided we didn't want to do anything more with this form right now, not just we neglected to think about this form. that sort of the primary job we're trying to do, you think?
Yeah, I would
All
agree.
right.
And just for other like things that do come up, technical things behind the scenes that you need to make, like it's a place that you can have this separate.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just redundant what you said,
And
but
it's just nice to know all these things are live now. So that changes the context of them, right? So we know that they're by definition past MVP. So one of the things that could be involved in the review is adding things to a milestone. So you could imagine in the review, you're basically putting together a sprint or a set of sprints for a form, which is say that, oh, well, we had all these features before we wanted to get to. Let's get to some of them. Let's just pick off these 3. And then we put that in and then work on that. Or we could add new issues, but we could also remember that we have a well of issues to draw from. So I like this as a general model. I don't think we have to overthink it. And I don't think we have to worry about like making really precise checklists inside of it.
I feel like the strength here is flexible since we've already gotten, like it's already up then, and we're going to be changing what we want, like what the next past MVP steps are per form. It's going to be probably flexible is better.
Yeah, I think really the work here will be done by GitHub issues and maybe milestones. And this is the mechanism to make sure that we look at them. So I like it.
all right, then that was it for me. Thanks.
So does this currently
long.
reflect all this? Currently reflects all the live forms?
Yes, they all have a link to their testing on the testing server, production, and GitHub. Otherwise, they vary what information is actually on the card.
Okay. And then this week makes me think that we also might want to think about another classification of forms, which is sort of retired forms, like the CDC moratorium form, which is a form that we retired because we had to change it because there is no longer a CDC moratorium. But we didn't just remove it down because we wanted, if people had links coming in from places, to be like, hey, here's this thing, it's this is no longer valid. So there had to be a message there, right? So that's just something to think about. There may be a set of forms, and maybe that's just it just lives in here, but maybe we put a sticker on it or something. Because in theory, a retired form shouldn't have to be revisited much, because you've probably hobbled the form, so it doesn't do anything.
Shouldn't they have their own list column?
That's a thought.
Then they'll
if
never
they-
go back into they never go back
Yeah.
into the cycle unless
Yeah,
for some reason something comes revived and we say, oh, didn't we used to have something? And then you go,
and so maybe an additional vertical preceding all of the other ones, so it's sort of out of the
yeah.
loop.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Like
I
a
wonder,
backlog.
actually, can you can archive cards. I wonder if you can archive a list so
You
that
can.
it's there.
I'm sure you can.
It's there if you want to find it. And then it would really be, you have to remember that it exists, but
Well, you
Yeah, the
can't-
archiving.
I don't
very
think
much
you
like
can
deleting to me
hide
now
a
with
list.
usage.
It's I don't
Well,
think archiving is hiding. I don't think it's the
Yeah,
equivalent.
it's not the way you think it is. I feel like archiving old instead of like having a separate list for things that we aren't using anymore, just archiving the cards. Because like at that point, once we come back and think like, oh, didn't we used to have a form for X? We're not going to be like scrolling through and trying to find a specific card. We're going to be using search, and archives, I think, still show up in search.
Do they?
I'd have to check.
I'm not sure
yeah,
about that.
so but when
They
you said you're not
do.
going to
No,
be
they
hiding,
do.
I think when you archive a
Okay.
card, you don't see it anymore, but it
At the
does
least
show.
there has
it
to be a
does
way to
show
search
up in
for
search.
archives.
Yeah, I think I think that's right. But that's what I'm wondering whether, but so this is I suppose that's do we need a column or can we archive the card? I guess that's the question. And that's a logistical question.
I think for
Right.
now, let's stick with
List.
let's have a column,
Mhm.
because then there's a visual component, which is of course the entire idea behind the Trello, which you can see how many there are there.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I don't think there's much of a difference. But if we are on the side of not making something go out of sight,
Right.
I think it's
Because
probably,
you're trying to keep track of it. So if you make it
Yeah.
invisible, it's kind of hard to keep track of it.
yeah. So I think add another column, and we'll as with all things, we'll evaluate as we go.
And I think maybe when you decide that a card goes into that list, there should be a checklist or something like, what are you doing for people who, a redirect essentially, right? Like
Yeah.
you're saying you've got the message for the CDC, and that has to happen, at the same time as or before you move the card into the archive list.
I think that sounds right.
It's just something to remember to do, which MassGov never does. It makes people crazy.
Well, you don't want to, you got all these links from everywhere.
Exactly,
You
yeah.
land somewhere, you got to know.
I know, yeah.
All right.
Sorry, oopsie. Oh, speaking of which, the website, I think this is a tactical thing, but the Courts Online website has not yet been around long enough or big enough for you guys to not have pages anymore. One of the things that I read a few years ago on one of these, I don't know who it was, but it's like Smashable or Mashable or Smashing Magazine or whatever it is. But they were saying, it doesn't take a lot of effort, but a really good thing to do is if people can't find a page on your website that they did have a URL for and you haven't redirected. So basically, they end up on a 404 page. Your 404 page should have a search on it with some results, so that when they get there, you can say, we can't find the page you're looking for, the exact page you're looking for, but do any of these pages match?
Right.
And I thought that was a really great solution for a 404
generally a
page.
good- That is actually on my list of things to do with the 404, but
Oh, yay.
Yeah, I just checked our 404. It's pretty
yeah, I
bad.
just checked it too. It's not even it's on my list, but it never comes up. So
Well, it turned out it wasn't that hard to
Mhm.
implement on Mass Legal Help. And I just think it's so friendly to
Right.
people.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
think
all
I was gonna say we would probably need to add search. I don't think that's a thing that we have.
no, although
Yeah, not yet.
effectively the description of your problem is a search.
Oh, so it is. But what do you do if people if you don't come up, do you come up with do you ever come up with answers like, we can't help you because we don't have anything for your problem?
Yes, that occasionally happens.
Oh, so
And
you
it says we don't have it.
yeah, and then you can't really send people, you definitely don't want to send people. It's like, oh.
Well, so
you want to
the-
complain for child support? How about we don't have a complaint for child support? How about enforcing a child support order you don't have?
Well, so what it generally does is it goes within sort of areas and says, we don't have a form here. And then it suggests they might want to look at the Mass Resource Finder in
Yeah.
the equivalent area or
Yeah.
look at an attorney.
Mhm.
But all right, anything else, Aubrey?
Oh, sorry, I took
All
my
right.
time.
No, I knew you would be long, which is why I had you first, because I wanted to get to those. And actually, some of those were mine too. So you've covered all of mine. That being said, real quick before we switch gears, is there anything, Michelle, Bryce, or Caroline, that you would like to bring up in a technical capacity before we switch over to stand up?
Yes.
I can see Bryce is making. There we go.
So I made a GitHub issue about this earlier that I know Quentin has seen, but essentially I was like, there's someone gave feedback about the civil docketing form about review edit your answers wasn't working. So I fixed that really quickly. And then as I was just on production, updating the package and checking the logs to make sure it was there, I saw that there's another random error in the logs from just an unrelated package. I think it was just the affidavit of indigency, but it wasn't a thing that it looked like anyone had reported. And I sort of realized I think DocAssemble has a way to send an email whenever a user sees an error page. And this, speaking of error pages and stuff, do we it seems I know that there are at least a decent amount of configurations and stuff we can change with error pages. Do we want to start doing that? I would offer to just put my email in there right away, so at least it gets seen, but probably not the best thing for me to do for the next month or so. But long term, I would be fine just sort of monitoring that. And
is the email address it's not made visible to the end user, right? It's just
it's in the configuration. I think I assume it's something that DocAssemble, if it serves up an error page, it also shoots off an email. Yeah,
that seems like an appropriate an appropriate, that should go to massaccess@suffolk.edu.
Okay. Are there like extra weird label things that we have for that email address? Because if not, I can just add that right now.
No, you can just do that, and then Quentin and I both have access to that mailbox, and we actually could in the future, but not now because there's enough on your plate. But in the
Yeah.
future, we could give you access to that mailbox as well, and then that could
Cool.
just be a place where we look. That's where we tend to get other issues and complaint. Someone found something. It's like blah, blah. So
Yeah. Cool. I will add that then.
all right. Any other tactical things before we move to stand up? And everyone else, you get to see how the sausage is made here. Is that a hand, Michelle? I can't tell. It's blurred.
No, it's